getting a job in the environment. Briana Riley is joining me today. I'm Sarah Lowe. Really excited to be working with you, Bri, and really glad that we had this chance to talk about this topic.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this too. We were talking earlier just about the uncertainty of this time, so I'm just glad that we can have this conversation with everyone and hopefully bring some clarity to a really confusing topic. So yeah, very excited.
We're going to talk about networking. We're going to talk about finding job positions. We're going to discuss preparing a resume and a cover letter, how to prepare for an interview, how to wait. You know, waiting is not easy, as Mo Willems says, and and mentorship, and then managing stress while applying for a job, and especially with COVID in mind.
Sounds good. Yeah. So before we sort of get into like the specific steps of job searching and all of the various components, there are three big things I think just to keep in mind throughout your entire job search, and something that really will help to ground you as you're going through what is, like, you know, you're taking this risk, you are putting yourself out there a lot, and so it can be really frustrating. So there are three things to really keep in mind to just ground yourself and keep that perspective throughout. And the first piece is that this is a human-centric process. And what does that mean? It means that, like, you know, more than likely there's a person on the other side that is reviewing your resume. That's like somebody is responsible for that. Somebody is responsible for scheduling the interviews that you have, whether it's one round or there's three rounds. And, you know, there's an individual that is, you know, conducting those reference checks and following up and answering your questions. And I think that's important to remember because, you know, it's not just like a system you're talking to. I think that it's helpful just to keep yourself, it gives hope, and it also just gives yourself perspective that, like, you're not just sending in your application to this black hole. It is being received by someone, and someone is seeing it. Someone is looking at your application. So keeping that in mind is helpful. The second piece here is just some like situational context about the environmental industry and, like, what does that look like. So when we think about a lot of environmental organizations, you know, especially in the nonprofit realm, a lot of those organizations are pretty small. Even if they have, you know, a national scope or a regional scope, the staff size of that organization tends to be smaller. So keeping that in mind as well is helpful, because it's more likely the case that whoever is reviewing your resume, whoever is receiving your application, probably also has so many other things on their plate that they're also responsible for. And so just remembering that, and I guess it's just like a second way to say that there is another person on the other side of this, and, you know, keeping that in mind, I think should help you to just like keep that perspective. And then the last thing that I think is important to keep in mind is, you know, the environmental industry, depending on the organization, operates on a calendar, and that those calendars tend to be more seasonal than a lot of different industries. It's unique in that way, where maybe the spring and the summer is, you know, they have more like a higher need than in the winter time. So keeping that in mind for the types of roles that you're looking for and what those internal needs might be for the organization. So even if it's, you know, the most important thing to you in that moment, it might not be the first priority for that organization, and keeping that in mind as you're applying. All these things can help to just really like ground yourself and keep yourself motivated to keep applying, which tends to be one of the hardest things, is just to maintain that motivation. So yeah, I think that covers it. But Sarah, is there anything else that you would add to that, to like things to keep in mind? Good. Okay. Yeah, then we can go. I guess the job search timeline can be like, it's helpful to sort of be able to visualize it in this way, where there's steps that you can take to get yourself to the place where you have secured a role and you're happy and you have found a place. and you've found, you know, your purpose in the industry. And so it's good to be able to sort of break it out into these steps. But of course, things to like, something to keep in mind about this timeline is that it's not as if like once you get through one step you stop, you know, like all of these things are sort of continuous, right? So like you do really always want to be networking, and we'll talk more about that. And mentorship is something that hopefully you have the opportunity to have a variety of different kinds of mentorships and meet different mentors throughout your career. And so that's also something that you want to keep going throughout your career before and, you know, before you have a role and after you have landed your role as well. And so we'll get into more of this, but I think this is a helpful visualization. Just keep with the caveat of a lot of these things should keep going as you're applying, including applying to jobs should always keep going until you've found that place that you're looking for. So we'll get into all of it, but I wanted to emphasize that, and also point out this piece again about waiting, and Sarah mentioned that in the beginning, but it is a part of the process. Part of your action is to you know, it's like hurry up and wait kind of thing, because you do have to just like practice that, and it's just an inevitable part of the process. So keeping that in mind as well. So yeah, I think that covers it for this slide. So diving right into networking, I really like this topic. I think it's one of those things that a lot of people are like really uncomfortable with, and you know, I work with a lot of students that don't love the idea of like putting themselves out there and trying to meet new people, because it's not, you know, it takes them outside of something that they're comfortable with. And so I do understand that this is not everyone's favorite thing to do, and in some ways it could seem like it's favoring, you know, like more extroverted personalities. But I do think that there's room in that. There's different ways and different opportunities for all kinds of people to be able to network, especially nowadays. And so getting into that more, I'll also just share, like, personally, I think that, you know, I got my start in the environmental industry through an AmeriCorps program, and the networks that I was able to build in that program is what like sort of like helped me to build the rest of my career and is responsible for where I am today. And so a lot of those relationships that I've built over time, I still have today. And so I think that's sort of like what the biggest piece that I got out of it is like that network of people that I know can like hold me and support me in this space. So I do think it's really valuable. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about is just like the reasons why people network. I think once I understood this is when I really started to understand why it's so important and what I need it for. So a lot of people think that it's really just for like when you need the access to a job offer, when you need someone to like write your recommendation, or when you see a job opening you like and you want an interview. And while it definitely like that is a possible pathway for how you can leverage your network, there's also a bunch of other different ways that you can lean in on the people that are around you, and that are supporting you. And so I listed those here. The first one is gathering information, which is, you know, it's really great to be able to call on people if you have questions about a particular career path, or maybe you're just gathering information about like what kinds of roles exist at an organization, or what the culture is at a particular organization that you're learning more about. Those things, it helps to have that insider insight in those that have more experience. So gathering information is like really precious there. That second part, which I use often, is just seeking advice and guidance. And you know, if you're having a conflict at work, if you're having you know, sort of like have a debate between like how to approach a various, you know, different kinds of situations that you might be facing, or you're making, you know, personal decisions about where you want to take your career. I think like being able to lean in on people to ask them, get their insight, get their suggestions for how they would approach it, I think that that's really valuable and helps to, helps to just sort of like put you in the right direction and give you the resources that you need. The third piece is collaborating on projects. So, like maybe there's something you want to work on outside of your role or, volunteer experiences or school. And, like this, it's a great way to like build out. You never know what can come of, like working with somebody that you're both excited about a project and you can put that time in together. Or even if it is through work or, volunteering, all of those things help you to build your network and build the people around you that like know who you are and what you care about. And then the fourth thing is just gaining new perspectives, which maybe goes without saying because the more people you know, the more perspectives you have access to. But I think it's especially important in the environmental realm because there should be a lot of voices in the spaces that we're working. Drawing more attention to those issues that maybe are overlooked, like especially if you're working in a community and you have that sort of focus. And so making sure that you're reaching out and bringing in. And so I think that those are really great reasons to network, in addition to the like added benefit of like maybe you'll get a job out of it. So I always like to think about all the things that you can get out of it before suggesting people go out and do it, which is the scarier part. And then the second piece here is just like, where do you go to network, and what does that look like? And so I've definitely found a large part of my network I mentioned through work. So like in my AmeriCorps placement, so that's you can have like in-office networking, just speaking to people that work on your team and those that don't as well. There's events and service projects. So of course, like, I don't know how a lot of COVID has changed a lot of things. So like the events that I used to volunteer at aren't really happening at the moment in the same ways, but that definitely still an opportunity to meet people in whatever form they're taking these days. And then there's online platforms like LinkedIn and Lunch Club, which I'll just share a little bit, is actually this site you can sign up for, and you can like sign up to speak to someone that like it pairs you with anyone that you want to speak to. If you want to learn more about knitting, then you can, they'll match you with somebody that knows more about that, but you can also make it really careers focused and talk to somebody that is doing something you're especially excited about. And it's just a conversation. You can suggest that you're interested in talking, or you're interested in jobs, or you're interested in collaborating together. And so it's a great way to like practice putting yourself out there and also really meeting cool people. So I would suggest that. And then also interviews. I tend to try and like collect people that I meet in interviews, because if it's a great relationship, it's a great relationship, and why not? And so just don't be afraid to sort of think of if you meet someone that you're connecting with, try and keep that relationship alive, because you don't know what can come of it. And so yeah, I don't know. I know I said a lot, but Sarah, did you have anything to add here?
That was great. I think the only thing I would add is that I know for me, it's always been really intimidating to go to like a networking event where I don't really know anybody, and or maybe I just barely know people, and the first question's always, oh, what do you do, or what do you want to do? And it's like, I don't know, or I do know, but I never have felt like I had good answers to those questions. And I think one thing I've appreciated is that even though I don't really like those kinds of network events where I don't know anybody, I have a really strong network, and a lot of it comes from getting to know like one person at a time, basically. And if that kind of resonates with other people in this virtual room here, it doesn't have to be that you get to know 20 people a tiny bit. It can be that you connect a little bit with one person, and then you follow up with them and you get to know them a little bit better, and then that might lead to more of a network, and then you just sort of piggyback off of that, and before you know it, you have tons of people in your network, and you feel really connected to those individuals.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think that that's so important because it's I definitely was not a person that like excelled at like the really public events with like 50 people and like trying to connect with all of them, or conferences and things like that. It's really, they can be intimidating spaces. So like having the time to sort of like connect with one person at a time, or even like I really like LinkedIn because I can carefully craft this message and like sit and think about what I want to say, and what my ask is. And so like I think that that's so important to keep in mind. Like it's not just one way to do it. You can find more comfortable ways, and one person at a time is a great way to like build a network of people that actually know you and can provide you with all these things that that networking can lead to. So yeah, yeah.
And I think I always felt like people maybe didn't want to engage in the way that I did. And what I found, I mean, I'm always happy to talk to people about the work world that I'm in, or, you know, if I know anything that is helpful to them. And a lot of people are like that too. You know, it's not like everybody's going to be like that, but I think probably most people, especially if they show up at a networking event, whether it's virtual or otherwise, that they're probably willing to have a conversation afterwards that's, you know, just one-on-one or something like that. So really putting, yeah, as you said, putting yourself out there in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think like most people are super excited to talk about themselves and share more about what they know. So yeah, don't now that I'm more on the other side of it and feel as though I have like things to offer as well. Maybe not as much as others, but you know, I think that it's like, of course I would talk to anyone that wants to talk to me. So it doesn't happen often that people reach out, but I think that makes it more like, of course that people would want to talk, because I'm sure they're not celebrities like getting like thousands of messages, you know. So keeping that in mind too, like everyone's just a person. So I think that helps. It goes back to those one of those first principles of just like remembering that there's people on the other side of it all. And I think with that, when I do reach out to people, oh, you can move on, but
Okay.
when I do reach out to people, just making sure that you have like a specific ask in mind. So know what you're asking for when you want to initiate a relationship with somebody new. It's hard for people to be able to help you if you don't really know what direction you're going. You don't have to have everything figured out, but just sort of know like what you would hope to get out of the conversation, or what they can help you with specifically. So you might not have that like all figured out immediately, but you will. And so like push yourself to really find that out. So with finding open positions, so I think that, you know, of course, like you are gonna want to, I mean, well, it's important to make sure that you're looking in multiple places, right? So I think that is probably advice that you can find anywhere. Like you don't wanna limit yourself to only looking in specific areas. You wanna make sure that you're you know, branching out wide, because you never know where you're gonna find something that is related to what you wanna do or gets your foot in the door. So of course you wanna look at job boards. I really love Idealist. I think that that's a great job board for, especially for nonprofit work, and you can filter it by like environmental roles, and like seniority level and that kind of stuff. So I think Idealist is great. There's also other environmental job boards. So like Texas A&M normally has a ton of roles. There's conservation job boards, which is like the actual like URL title. I realized that could have sounded like general. But there are some like environmental specific job boards that I think are worth checking out because they do update those pretty frequently. And then I also would suggest like the bigger ones like Indeed and LinkedIn. Indeed is harder to scrub through, but they definitely, I mean, LinkedIn, Sarah and I were talking about this earlier, like LinkedIn is actually nowadays a really great place to find information. And Indeed as well, even though it's a little bit harder to find what you're looking for. But yeah, with the LinkedIn piece, Sarah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else with that.
Yeah, I think it's just, well, for one thing, if you are sort of following organizations that you're interested in or that you are curious about the possibility of having a job at, there at this point, I think it's pretty likely that they would put a job position up on LinkedIn. And like Bree was saying, it's a few years ago, it didn't seem like the kinds of organizations that I was likely to be looking for were posting there. But now, especially in the past year, it seems like LinkedIn's being used a lot more for that purpose, for a broader group of organizations and agencies. And I also like going back to the organizations piece, if there are organizations that you're interested in, then looking, like taking the time to find out where they post jobs and even asking people, if you post a job, how do you do it? Because I really think your organization's awesome and I would love to be kind of on the lookout for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of organizations have their own specific unique ways that they disperse information, and it could be LinkedIn. It could also just be something that stays on their website and you have to know when to go to their website. They could, you know, they could send out newsletters, they could send out things that keep you in the loop with what's going on in the organization. But I think it's so valuable just to be able to ask someone like, how would I stay up to date about what's going on and what opportunities there are? Because even if they don't have a specific structure in place, because they might not, that person would make sure that you then know when something comes up. That person would probably just make sure like, oh, I heard actually there's a position open, I wanted to let you know. So that just, leads right into the third piece, which is like, rely on your network to, to share positions with you. I think like most of the positions I've gotten, since like getting out of school has been through my network, whether it was the network I first formed in AmeriCorps or just like through other contacts over time, other working experiences. So it's very rare that I like just applied to a job and got in. It was more so that like I knew someone who connected me, or told me that this position was open, and that's how I found out about it to even be able to apply. So yeah, keeping yourself informed through a variety of ways, very important.
And I'll just add one more thing too, that while I'm thinking about it, making it kind of personal here, that I know for me, I repost job opportunities on LinkedIn all the time. It's like 90% of what I do on LinkedIn is share out more jobs, because I know it can be hard to find the job position that you're interested in. So you can follow me if you're interested in the kinds of things that Tacoma Tree Foundation does, or even similar organizations in other parts of the world actually, yeah. But also following other people who do the same thing. I know whenever I'm having a day where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I have control over the things that are happening in the world, I start reposting jobs. It's just it's like a feel good thing.
I love that that's your feel good thing. That's the way to just like pay it forward. Yeah, so I know that there was a question about like submitting a portfolio and, like in your resume and cover letter and things like that. So I do think that the next couple of slides should answer your question. And so, yeah, with your resume, there's like a few different components that you're like things that you want to make sure are a part of your resume, no matter, what organization you're applying to. These are things that will speak to any role that you could be interested in, and will help you just like frame like what are the most important things to include on your resume and what are things that you can leave off. I think that was like really like the biggest like challenge for me, is figuring out like what do I highlight and like why. And so the first piece, which is like what I found to be like the most essential, is just highlighting your accomplishments. Like what have you been able to work on? What experiences have you had that you're proud of? It doesn't have to be like a really like you don't have to like be like monumentally like shifting the way a program looks or anything like that, or you don't have to like solve the climate crisis to call it an accomplishment. Like it can be something like you like taught a group of of students about like I don't know something, you taught students about trees, or you taught them how to how to like what something about trails, like whatever it is that's exciting for you, something that made you feel good, made you feel excited. If it means something to you, it's going to stand out to someone else. And that's sort of how I frame like what have I done in, especially if it's been something like if you're in a position and it's been like 10 or 11 months and you're not really sure like what you did. You forget what you did, even if it was like a 3-month time period. Just think about those things as moments that made you really excited to be at work, those things that you're really proud of participating in, and highlight those things. That's sort of like how I go about it. The second piece, which I think sort of speaks to having a portfolio of projects available for employers, I don't think you necessarily need to submit like a separate portfolio of projects unless they specifically ask you for that. It's if it's your dream job, then of course you want to like send everything that you can, anything that like speaks to your cause, like make sure like share it, like everything that you have, put your best foot forward. If not, I wouldn't spend like your whole day crafting these portfolios for like every single job. I think you'll burn yourself out. But a good way, like something that I learned to include in my resume, is just highlighting all of the projects and courses that I took, any relevant pieces of, like maybe it was a report I put together or something like that. I would include that in the resume, and that would really help to sort of, especially if I wanted to get involved in a role that I didn't have specific experience in. So that's really great to include. The next piece there is your skills and your education. So of course, include any education you have, include any like, highlight any skills you have. And they can be like technical skills, but they can also be, like the softer skills. I think like highlighting that you have conflict resolution skills or classroom management skills, those could really speak to specific roles that you're applying to. So be on the lookout and cater your resume to what you're looking for. And then the last piece is leadership. And I think that I struggled with this for a while because I didn't recognize a lot of what I was doing as leadership. But, anything that you're putting yourself outside of your comfort zone is a leadership development opportunity. And so including that and defining that as leadership is something that I make a priority to do now. Is like, no, I did this thing and I was like a little nervous to do it, or it wasn't something that was a part of my regular job. And that is something that you want to highlight as a part of your leadership section if you'd like to have it. So yeah, those are the like core components of a resume that I would say would keep you on the right path. So yeah, I don't know, Sarah, if you have anything else, feel free to jump in.
Were we going to talk about transferable skills here, or
Where I think
could mention.
it comes up. I think it
Okay.
comes up a little later. Yeah.
Okay, I'll wait. No, this is
Okay.
great. Thank you. That was awesome. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We can go to the next
Okay.
slide then. Cool. So, yes. So applicant tracking systems. So these, these days a lot of organizations are starting to use systems that, they like purchase a system that reads your resume, like scans it automatically. And that helps to, I guess that really helps them to be able to just like screen applicants a little bit quicker. So it helps them to like improve efficiency. And so that's why they're used. But I think that what a lot of folks unfortunately are not aware of is that it also means that the way that you format your resume should be like, you should sort of adjust it to make sure that the system is picking up your resume and you're not being sort of, you're not having that black hole issue where you send your resume in and it doesn't reach anyone on the other side. So this is the only time when it potentially could actually not reach someone on the other side. But there are ways to avoid that. There are ways to guarantee that your resume does make it into their system and they can capture all the information and have what they need to reach back out to you. So the first thing is, unless you're 100% sure that the applicant tracking system is like newer and updated, which I don't know how you would confirm that from the candidate side, I would actually encourage you to submit your resume as a Word document. And this is because PDFs can be like just harder to read. I don't know if you've ever tried to like upload your resume to a platform that says we'll help you and like pull out the information, and then you upload your resume and nothing gets pulled, or it's pulled all the wrong way. That's because it's a PDF, and so or because like the formatting was off for the system, and so your best chance is to submit it as a Word document. You also want to make sure, if you can, to avoid using like tables. So you don't want to put any grids on your resume using columns or rows, and you also want to avoid putting your contact information in the headers and footers. I struggle with this because I personally really like to put my contact information in the header because then it gives me more room to talk about all the things I want to say. But when you do this, it actually, the computers like can't read any information in the header. And so all of your contact information doesn't get attached to your application, and it's more difficult for them to like find out how to contact you. So it's not like the end of the world, but it's one of those things where like any sort of barrier that a recruiter or someone in HR or, someone who's like balancing a ton of things faces, they're gonna like, they'd rather go for the more convenient option, so anything you can do to reduce those barriers for them is gonna be helpful. So formatting wise, definitely thinking about that. The next piece is just like matching keywords. I'm sure you've heard this before. You do want to like go through like the keywords of the job description and try and match it as closely as you can in your resume so that they can see exactly like, like experiences that they're looking for or experiences that you've had. And if there like are words that have like acronyms attached to them, or they have the long form, like make sure you're matching it literally exactly, just because then it'll raise your match higher up in like whatever algorithm the computer is running, and you just have a higher chance of getting a call back. And so to that point, using like more direct, like simple, concise language is going to be helpful. Flowery language is great for cover letters, not so much for resumes. And that would go for whether you're applying through a system or sending it to a person. It's just easier for people to read, and so it's easier for the computer to read as well. And then the last two about like formatting, you want to make sure that like your section headings just have the same exact, and this like, I think that this is one of those things that's easy to overlook. Just like triple check that all of your section headings have the same kind of bolding, the same size, everything like that. All of your bullet points are like the same like amount of spacing, like indented in, like all of those things should be just uniform. It does really help the computer system to be able to pick it up. And hopefully one day these things won't be an issue, but for now, like all things to keep in mind. And then of course, like you want to use like more traditional fonts. So I listed some here, but then below there are some resources that you can use to get some templates and some fonts and some additional resume advice for managing these systems. So yeah, that's everything here. So then cover letters. So I think that cover letters are, I mean, I guess it depends. I really love cover letters because I really like writing, but I know that not everyone feels very confident in their writing skills, and cover letters are something that can take a lot of time and effort. And so the first thing I'll say is like it's okay that it takes you time. This really is like your opportunity to share, you know, like how your work experiences and you know, volunteer experiences and, you know, coursework and everything that you've experienced ties all together, and like how it feeds into your larger ambitions for like what you'd like to see in the environmental industry, how you'd like to participate, what role you'd like to play. All of those things are things that, you know, people reading it want to know about. I know that like when I was reviewing a lot of cover letters, I was really looking for people to share something that was outside of their resume. I can look at your resume and see like what you've done. I want to look at your cover letter and find out more about who you are and like what specifically you would bring to the organization or to the role itself. And so really use that as an opportunity to like share, like tell them who you are, tell them what you hope, you know, to accomplish and where you want to go in your career or within that role. And you know, it's you know, be confident in that, like be proud of like everything that you've accomplished, and also you know, just be open and transparent. So yeah, I do think that covers all of this here actually. So I think this is the piece actually for like where transferable skills come into play. So when you're preparing for an interview, I like to put the definition here that like I pulled from Google. Like if you Google it, if you Google the word interview, this is what the definition that comes up. And so I actually really liked it though, a meeting of people face to face. I thought that was a perfect way to describe it, because it's really like helps to just like take the stress out of it. You know, like I think interviews a lot of the times are framed as if they're like this like place of judgment where you're going to be like go and they're going to determine like who you are and like how confident you are and all of these like really intimidating things. But as you can see, Google says it's not that. It's just like people coming together and being able to meet. So I actually thought that was a really great way to think about it, because it is exactly that, and it is that opportunity just to like meet someone. Of course, like face to face is like screen to screen these days, but I think the essence stays the same. And so that the first piece does sort of speak to those the transferable skills piece that Sarah had mentioned before. So I don't know, Sarah, did you just want to take that piece and talk more about it?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's so important. And I know we talked about this before too, that Oftentimes people feel limited that they can only talk about the jobs or the work that they've done that is really specifically sounds like the job that they're trying to get. Instead of thinking about what are the qualities, what did you bring or learn from other experiences that help make you a good candidate for the job you're applying for. So, I mean, like in what role did you play in a team environment? So it doesn't matter if you were working in retail or if you were serving at a restaurant. If you were kind of like the captain, you know, you're kind of helping get people excited to work or to work together. If you were helping solve conflicts, things like that might be perfect for a volunteer coordinator position. You know, like if you're good at managing time or being organized about tasks, then again, that might be something you can transfer to something else, even if you learn them or practice them in a position that sounds different. And we also talked about the volunteer piece, that if you're volunteering somewhere and you're building skills doing something, you can still talk about that in an interview or in your cover letter. And that's a really important thing to share with people. And often you need to be the one making those connections for people and not expecting that the person that's interviewing you will be able to say, oh, well, if they worked in babysitting, they are probably responsible, therefore they could be responsible in this other setting or something like that. You really want to help people understand the story of your work experience or of your personal experience, so that then they go, oh yeah, of course, this is exactly, this all fits together for us really well. And then I'll let you cover the second half.
Yeah, no, I think that's great too, and it really does like feed into that second piece. Like, I think that we often, you know, I know like when I'm applying to jobs, I spend like hours and hours just like looking at my resume and like reading it over again and like, how does this sound? And if I add a comma, how does it sound like that, right? So like over analyzing to the point where it's like probably not as helpful as I think it is. And so like we get so familiar with our experiences that we think it's just like so obvious. Like, obviously I have all these great experiences. Of course I'm like more than qualified to do this role, you know? And so it seems more obvious to us, but you know, to the person who's just looking at your resume for the first time, and you know, is still getting to know you, it's not as obvious. So it is so important to be able to like connect the dots. And something that I found is really helpful, like when before I go into an interview, I like already have identified all the different things that I know is like, okay, I want to make sure that I highlight these three things about myself. So I start with like, what kind of a person do I need to be? Like, what is it that I'm hoping that they take away? Like, I want them to know that I'm responsible. I want them to know that, that I'm passionate about this. I want them to know like something, I like thrive in like spaces where I can be like analytical, like whatever it is that you're excited to share about yourself, like make sure you like call that out for yourself, and then specifically identify like what sorts of accomplishments, what stories and experiences can you share that help to like illustrate those characteristics within yourself. And that's really how you like control the direction of the interview. That's as much as you can do to make sure that like by the time you leave the interview, you're not feeling like, oh, I wish I had the chance to say like talk about this story because it's so great and I think it's like exactly what they're looking for. You don't want that feeling leaving an interview. And I've had those where I'm like, wow, I like wish I talked about this thing because it's like exactly what they were asking for. But then it's too late, and so you don't want to be there. It will happen maybe, but as much as you can prepare and just like tell yourself like these are the things that I'm gonna make sure I say. That really helps to get yourself in a position where like you're gonna tell your story and connect the dots for them. So that's all that second bullet point is there.
I really like those, like having 3 things that you want to share about yourself or that you want them to take away. I think that's a really good one.
Yeah, it's really helped me in like just like staying focused. I think that of course you want them to think you're the perfect candidate, but you do also like there has to be things that you're like, these are my priorities. It's like this is like the most important thing that you know about me before I leave here today. So yeah. So that brings us to during the interview. So the fun part. Um, so there are definitely a few things to just keep in mind, and we do keep talking about like sharing your story. And there's like I think there's like we mean this in a whole bunch of different ways, but when you're specifically if you're thinking about an accomplishment or an experience that you've had in the past, there is this like the star responses, which there are a ton of resources online that sort of like outline what star responses look like and what that means. But just to briefly sort of frame it here is, it's just a way of talking about an experience that you've had in a really structured way that helps the employers to see like what kinds of problems can you handle? What do you do when you encounter problems like this? And like how does it change things? Like what was the outcome so that they can see like what you're capable of and like I guess how you've demonstrated what you're capable of. And so like the situation is just like the context, like what's going on. The task is like what you need to do. The action, it typically involves like addressing some sort of conflict. Like it's like literally just like a book, right? Like something has to go wrong, so you have to save the day. And like, what did you do to save the day? And then the result, like what was the outcome? What came out of it? And I think that I always like to tell people that there's a silent L for lessons learned. But you can just include that in the results section. Just like make sure you tell them like what was the outcome of the project, but also what was the outcome for you yourself individually as a professional or as a person. I think that really like speaks volumes for employers and helps them to understand again who you are. And then the second piece, breathe. I know that Sarah, you had like more to say on that, so I don't know if you wanted to just take this section.
Sure. When we were discussing this presentation, it was like, I think both of us really felt that breathing was an important part. Now, obviously, of course, like breathing is something we're doing all the time. You're doing it right now. But I think there's this tendency in an interview to just like, I have to spit out an answer right away and maybe even say it very quickly. And there may even be a certain amount of like, I don't really want to be here in this moment and it's very uncomfortable. So I want to hurry up and get it over with sort of thing. But breathing, you can take a pause. Somebody asks you a question, you can take a break for a moment. And you can even say, like, I need a minute. I just want to think about this for a second. And usually, interviewers will be interviewing like many people possibly in a day. And so it can actually help the interviewer switch from asking questions to actually listening. And so it can be so if you think it, sometimes it's helpful to think of like me taking a pause is helping this other person also take a pause. And meanwhile, that might give you a chance to just think through your answer a little bit. And it doesn't have to come out perfectly. Just giving yourself a moment to wait for a second. And then even if you know exactly what you want to say, just waiting a moment. And it does illustrate to people that you can take a deep breath and pause before moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I love that what you said, like you can take a moment to pause before moving forward, because I think that's probably something that's more like more assessed on a subconscious level, or more something that employers are looking for but might not indicate in any way that they're looking for that. But it is really important because like stress is always there, and they do want to hire people and bring people in that like can just like understand what's going on and like, you know, take that moment to process before, you know, like barreling into a situation. It's a skill. So so breathe normally, but also breathe with intention. And then the next piece, and I think like it sort of the next two pieces are actually sort of connected in that, like, you know, if you're given a question from the interviewer, like definitely feel free to like ask them to repeat themselves or reword it if you're unsure what they're asking you, or if you missed it or something like that. I like, there's not an interview I've been in where I didn't ask, like, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Can you repeat it? And I think it happens, right? Like sometimes people say things and they think it makes perfect sense to them, but it doesn't, you know, receive well on the other end. That happens. People are not going to be offended. You don't have, it's not like a test. They're just asking you a question. So like, you know, ask them back, like, what is it that you're actually asking that didn't quite make sense to me? Can you repeat yourself or rephrase the question? They would be more than happy to do so because they want to give you a fair chance. They're not trying to trick you. And then just to like go along with being able to ask questions in the interview, like at the end, they are asking, like they really do want you to ask them questions, and like they want you to like sort of reverse interview them, like figure out like, you know, is this the right fit for you too? So, you know, bring your questions about the organization and like what you're excited about, what you're excited to learn about, because they'll definitely be like assessing you, I guess, on like what kinds of questions you're bringing in if they're thoughtful. And so that's also a huge piece as well to keep in mind.
I always like to add to that, at that moment at the end when they say, because I've never been to an interview when there hasn't been a moment when they've asked, do you have any questions? You always want to have questions, like you said. And also, if those three things, or you know, some things about yourself that you really wanted to share, you didn't get to say because the questions didn't, just say it then. I mean, you could say, I have these questions and also this thing about me that I want to make sure you know. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And kind of goes back to making that case for yourself that you are a good candidate. And one other thing to mention as well is that you might not get this job that you're getting the interview with, but they may have another interview, you know, they might have another position open up 3 months later that might be a better fit for you. This might be an opportunity to get to know the organization from this longer term perspective, that even if this doesn't work out, this might be the interviewer might be somebody who becomes part of your network, or this organization might be part of your longer term plan.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that brings us to waiting, which is my favorite part of the interview process. I think like the biggest thing here is definitely to like just practice your patience and really like you know, remember sort of like our grounding principles about everything being, it's a human process and they need time and it takes time. And that's okay. You never know where they're at in their process, if it's just started or they're wrapping up, or anything like that. So try not to assume, just like stay patient. And something that I used to do, and it would drive me crazy, and I would have like severe anxiety. It's like terrible. It's just like sit and like analyze, like, what did I do wrong? What did I do okay in? Like, how should I have said this differently? And like really beat myself up about, you know, how the interview went. And really, it doesn't help, you know, like I think like meaningful reflection is great, especially if you know that like there were some things that you said that you wanted to word better or things like that. But if you're sitting there like, you know, day in and day out thinking about like what went wrong and like sort of like applying that to like who you are as a person and like or a characteristic that you carry, that's when you know it's getting to like a more toxic place, which is where it was getting with me. And so I would definitely encourage yourself to like pull away from that, try and distract yourself, which sort of leads to like that other piece about just like keep keep yourself applying, like distract yourself from sitting and zooming in on this one this one issue. Like, stay applying and just like maybe go for a run or something, do something to keep your body moving and like get that energy out. I really like exercise and cooking, things like to do with my hands. So like find ways to get that energy out and keep yourself from like, just like tossing it around your head. And then of course, like after it's been some time, no less than a week, but they'll probably tell you like what the timeline is. So you are allowed to follow up and stay connected with the organization. Of course, you don't want to like wait a month and like not follow up with anyone, but like try not to follow up like, in a day or two like that. It's more than likely they haven't really debriefed about it yet. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add there, Sarah.
I think that's right on. Like, I mean, the not taking it personally, I guess, is a huge part of it. It feels so personal when you're in it, but then when you're on the other side of it, the interviewer side, you might be looking at tons of candidates, and even if you are the most perfect candidate, it may be in that you don't rise to the top of the candidate pool, but it may not have anything to do with your qualifications at the end of the day. So trying not to let it become personal, as you said.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really hard to do, but it doesn't dictate anything about who you are and what you bring to any organization. And so, yeah, with volunteering, so of course, like, there are ways, I think, just to like keep yourself involved without being like fully immersed or like having a position in the environmental industry. And so I think that there is like traditional forms of volunteering, and then there's like the more alternative forms of volunteering. And so there is, of course, like, traditional volunteering does look like event support, like reaching out to local organizations and seeing what they need help with. A lot of the times I would go like to various events and just like help with tabling or help, especially if it's like a family friendly event, like helping do something with like, paint kids' faces or something like that. So like getting involved with your local organizations to do like events. I mean, again, I don't know how much of this is happening in the COVID world, but that's like the more traditional pieces. And then there's also like more alternative ways to get involved, which is like writing something to like publish online. So you can write a blog post and like post it to your own website, or like you can actually like publish articles on LinkedIn or on Medium. And it's relatively easy, and it's just like, like share your opinion about a topic that you care about, or like encourage people to learn more about a topic that you're excited about, or sharing information. So try and challenge yourself in that way to be a part of the industry that in a way that doesn't involve that same kind of like, I guess, like physical effort. And then the other piece is just like paying it forward, right? And what I mean by that is just like there's more than likely someone that's like, like younger than you, or maybe not younger, but maybe is like interested in something that you're doing, that you have experience in, and you can like be that sort of guiding voice and sort of serve as their, mentor or peer mentor, and help them to understand, like, give them some guidance on like what they could do and what their options look like. So that's also a really like valid way to volunteer and give back to the industry and sort of support the community. And so keeping those things in mind, that it doesn't have to be a job, it can be volunteering. But I know, like, when Sarah and I were talking about this, we also were talking about sort of like there are like sort of like two sides of volunteering, where it is great and it's a wonderful way to spend your time and very rewarding. And also you have to be very clear with yourself and with, the organizations you're working with about your boundaries. And so making sure you know like what your time commitment is. If it's 10 hours a week, it's 10 hours a week, and that's what you give. And just like have clear expectations about what your roles are. So of course, like if you are volunteering at an event, you're not volunteering to be like the medical aid for all of the, students that come in so you can provide CPR. Like it's not that, it's that you're like coming in to do this one table and you're going to do this one table. So just being very clear about what it is you're volunteering for so that you just keep your sanity and prioritize your health. So you can go. The finding mentors piece is really very straightforward, I think. I just wanted to sort of highlight here that like you can find mentorship in a variety of places. So I've found mentorship with like people that, have supervised me, with people that maybe didn't supervise me, but were like in higher level positions that I could turn to for advice because they've had that sort of like industry experience or organizational experience. Also like collaboration partners. So like organizations that I've worked closely with on big projects, just like turning to them to get that mentorship. And then also like with peers, like people that have gone through similar situations that I have, or the exact same one, especially like folks that are in the AmeriCorps network. I think that there, like there is some camaraderie there. So like just like making sure you're looking for those like mentorship opportunities and seeking it out in various places, because your needs for a mentor and like what you're hoping to get out of it will change over time. And so keeping in mind like what those avenues are can be helpful. And then there's so I mentioned it a few times, but of course we are living in the age of COVID. And so while searching for a job, that does mean that there's some like added stress and added pressure that, we haven't seen before, that we haven't ever experienced before as a society. And so like what can we do on top of just like, remembering our grounding principles from the beginning, like what else can we do to sort of manage the stress of the uncertainty? And so the first thing is like, well, I'll say like we did like share some like tools throughout this whole thing and like, ideas for how to format your resume and what to include in your cover letter and things like that. But, when you're thinking about it, it's like we have to acknowledge like where we are at in the world today. Like these are conditions that we haven't seen. And I know that people might be tired of like hearing it or seeing it, but it is very true. And like organizations are literally thinking like, how are we going to stay afloat? Like, what are we going to do to make sure that we stay relevant and can still stay engaged and all of these things. And it's a huge learning curve for everyone. And so just acknowledging where we're at in our current situation, I think can help to like, just like, it really gives a name to like what we're feeling and experiencing. And that in itself can help to bring down like some of that anxiety that you're feeling. And then the second piece is like, just like adjusting our expectations a bit, right? So I think that the first thing that I really resonate with is like your next job that you get does not have to be your dream job. I think there is that like this like romanticized idea that like you graduate from school and you just like end up at this perfect place and you stay there for like your entire career, and it's like the best place ever. But that's like not necessarily the case. It wasn't the case before COVID even. And it's definitely not the case now. So just keeping that in mind, like you don't have to find somewhere that's perfect, but getting your foot in the door is still progress. Any progress is progress, you know what I mean? So if you make a step forward, if you take that step forward, that's something to celebrate and be excited about. And so, just like being flexible with the kinds of opportunities that you're looking for, whether it's a contract position or a part-time role or things like that, if you're able to. And then of course, like the last piece is just like stay connected. It sort of goes back to like leaning in on your network and finding new people. Um, and like with that, like, you know, hopefully your network is a group of people that really help to energize you and refocus you. But if not, you know, like make sure that we're like integrating ways that we, you know, that like bring us joy within our day. So, you know, if you don't, you know, I used to forget to like, you know, I would like work outside with kids all day and then forget to like take walks by myself and like, you know, just enjoy the reason why I got involved in the industry in the first place. And I think that that's something you have to really strive to do. And so like push yourself to like keep filling your cup and re-energize and replenish yourself. So I don't know if you have anything to add on this slide here.
I think you're right on. I think maybe it can't be understated how much we need to be really gentle with ourselves right now, and how, and also, I mean, consider contractor positions. As Bree was suggesting, it's like a lot of organizations have to do things differently right now, and it's not like a forever, hopefully, it's not a forever way of changing, but you might be able to do work. It's easier to hire a contractor than it is to hire a full-time employee or even a part-time employee. And what that might mean is like if you have an idea for a particular kind of way that you can contribute to an organization, and it's a short-term thing, and maybe being open to the possibility that, oh, maybe I could do this one thing for this organization, and they could still pay me for it, but it isn't the job I had in mind, but it kind of gets me to the next step, and that might be something to consider. And then again, yeah, as you said, finding ways to have joy in all the things, and knowing that the experience you're having right now with looking for a job might not be the same experience you'll have 6 months from now or a year from now. So trying to stay really present, and not assume that your experience is like the forever experience or something.
Yeah, I think that's really great thing. Like change is inevitable, and so even this, like that feels like we've been. I know there's like a lot of like jokes about like November lasting a year, but like even this time has to change, because it's not going to be forever no matter what we do. So that gives me hope, at least.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, did you want to cover this one?
Yeah, sure. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that environmental, or people who are attracted to environmental work, tend to be mission driven. I mean, a lot of people tend to be mission driven anyway, but especially in the environmental and social fields. And to really think about what it is exactly that motivates you to make change, and what kinds of change you're really interested in making and seeing in the world. And that might seem like a really big question when you're thinking like, I just want to get my next job. But if you know that there's some things that really matter to you, and that even in small ways you want to make that kind of change, then you can bring that to the next job, even if that isn't the forever job that you have, because it probably won't be the forever job, because there are very few people who have forever jobs now. But it can help just give you clarity in terms of what you're hoping to get out of your day-to-day life, and also where there might be creative ways that you can tap into environmental organizations, even if it's sometimes you'll find a large engineering firm or something is looking for somebody who's interested in helping them with sustainability, and that might not be your ideal job, but it might be a way for you to practice or to make those changes that you'd like to see in the world. And maybe it is that you want to plant more trees, or you want to bring people together, or you want to help people feel like they belong, and that they want to make change with you. And all of those things are good, and anything that is on your heart is worth exploring. I think that's it. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Bree?
No, I think that was great. Yeah, I think that's perfect.
So we're pretty much wrapping up here, and really everything is relational. So you're welcome to stay in touch. Since we talked about these different ways that you can connect to jobs and things, I put our LinkedIn pages in here. So I know for me, you're welcome to look me up. You'll have to make sure you put the C in there or you will find so many Sarah Lowe's, including some I know. But you're welcome to be in touch with me. Like I said, I put job postings out whenever I see them. Did you want to add anything, Briana?
Yeah, I mean, please do reach out and connect with me if you have any like questions or just want to like talk, if you're nervous about an interview or anything like that you have coming up. I also I follow a lot of people that post a lot of jobs, so I might know something, and I think that's just another thing to keep in mind. So please do, connect with me on LinkedIn and keep in touch. I'd love to talk more, of course. So.
And I guess we can end on the last piece, which is, or a second to last piece, which is, again, a very much a thank you to Tacoma Creates for helping us do these kinds of educational programs and to explore using things like webinar and YouTube. So we'll be posting this presentation along with the last presentation we did together on our YouTube channel. I don't expect you to remember this, but if you look for Tacoma Tree Foundation on YouTube, you'll find us. We're like the fifth down, but you can find us there, and we'll be posting YouTube videos. We post them on average twice a week, but it usually ends up being like a whole bunch at once. And I think that's it. Thank you, Bree, so much for doing this. And thank you everybody for attending.